No one knew when Apia left Burma, but when he returned a few days later, it was obvious where he had been, for he came with Yeboah. His visit to Mansa had convinced him that the story was true. To Apia, no owner could be higher than to be the first man to tell the landlord that his long-lost daughter was alive. His main task was to make the landlord believe him. Yeboah rushed to Burma with Apia in disbelief. Can it be true? He kept asking Apia and himself. Doubt, excitement, and even sorrow crisis crossed his mind. That his daughter should be alive only reminded him of his wife Susa. What's coming upon me? He asked himself. Over-presumptions even nudged him to to entertain a faint hope that possibly Susa could be alive somewhere in this world. In Burma, he couldn't wait to see the girl Amma. The opportunity came that same evening. Apia accompanied Yeboah and two of his friends to Goma's house. The moment Yeboah entered the house, something seemed terribly wrong. The air was charged with a strange feeling, as if the whole thing was false. A girl came out of Goma's room and stood still upon seeing him. Yeboah also stopped. For the first time, Yeboah looked at the girl. He saw certain features which he quickly attributed to Susa, his wife. For a moment, he felt like dashing forward to hug his daughter, but the girl turned away and re-entered the room. Yeboah and the companion stood by while Amma informed Goma that some visitors had come to the house. When Goma came out and saw Yeboah, her first reaction was to retreat, as she always did whenever she came face to face with him. But now everything was different. There was nothing to hide. She stepped forward and said straight out, "Please sit down." Yeboah and the visitors sat down. But before they said anything, Goma continued, "I know why you came. Everything is now over, but we can't talk here. Call me in the chief's house." Yeboah heard it, but he kept glancing at Amma, who was standing at the doorway of Goma's room. When they went away, Yeboah had the face of his daughter engraved in his mind, just like Susa, her mom. He muttered, "Just like her." He was elated, but somewhere deep within he felt hidden sorrow reviving. "I've already told the chief and the elders here that I didn't give birth to a girl." Goma addressed the chief's linguistic. She had been asked to tell the story of how he had salvaged the tiny baby. In the silence of the palace, before the chief's council of elders, Goma narrated the pathetic scenes again. The elders ruled that, since they had heard from Goma's own lips that the girl was not her daughter, there was no case. Amma should go to her father. "I know that," Goma replied, "but I'm reminding the elders that I saved the girl from death. She would surely have died if I hadn't taken her. For 14 years, I cared for her as my own daughter, provided her with everything she needed, took her to school. Amma lacked nothing in the house. Let this woman know, elders," Yeboah said, "that my family and I highly appreciate what she had done. If she demands to be paid for," Goma cut in, "I was not requesting to be paid. My request is this: Amma is grown. She's not a child any longer. Let the elders call her and find out where she would like to live, with Yeboah or with me." That request made Yeboah angry. Did you ever hear this before, elders? There is no way the girl is going to remain with her. 14 years of agony is enough for me. Too much thinking about how the little child vanished was sending me mad. Don't you think I can hold you for? He stopped. For what? Goma asked, anger welling up in her. How do we know that you didn't do something to my wife in order to have the child? No, no, the chief cut in. Don't go that far, Yeboah. The old painful agony was threatening to awaken, and Yeboah would be glad not to relive it all over again. We cannot give the girl any option to choose between you and her father, the chief continued. You did well to tell us all about the girl and to admit that Yeboah is her father. You could have concealed the truth till the end of the world. Goma bit her lips. Indeed, she could. Having met his own daughter, the chief went on, Yeboah, who has not shown any reason why he cannot take care of her, will take her with him. That was the chief's verdict, and it was final. The matter would have ended there, but Goma stood up and said, and suppose Amma refuses to go with him. If the girl says this, the chief replied, bring the matter back to this court. That was the final word. Amma, you are my daughter. The girl gazed at the man who held her hands. Was this her father? So this landlord Yeboah was her father. And why had all this been hidden from her until now? When they asked her where she would like to be, with Yeboah or with Goma, Amma had chosen to go with Yeboah, since Goma was not her mother. But this man, whom she knew almost nothing about, if all this was true, that meant she had no mother. Yeboah watched the girl sitting before him and knew her mind was far away. You're not listening, Amma. I'm your father. I'm sorry about what happened to you. You will come home with me and everything will be alright. If she had no mother, then who was this woman that she was going to live with? A stepmother? Will she treat her like Goma treated Adu? She had been told that Yeboah had other children. How would those younger brothers and sisters regard her? Amma, Yeboah called and gently pressed her hand. Amma. Amma came and peered at her father. You look afraid, observed Yeboah. Amma nodded. Yeboah pressed her to him and tried to reassure her. You will come with me, won't you? Amma nodded, through a maze of disturbing thoughts. She raised her eyes for the first time and asked, how about Adu? What about him? What will happen to him? Amma asked. Then she said, Mother is very wicked to him. Yeboah wanted to shout, Mama is not your mother, but he held back. He knew it would take some time for Amma to get used to her new state. I asked Adu if he would like to come with me, but he said Apia wants to take him to the village. No, said Amma firmly. Adu must come with us. Her own fear of going to the new house would lessen if Adu went with them. Adu was her close friend and was an orphan, almost like herself. They needed one another for encouragement and support. Adu had always expressed the desire to get away from his auntie. Here was the opportunity. His father was a friend, the hardest worker in the village. I would be glad if Adu would come with us. I would talk to him, Amma said. She found Adu at home. He looked at her shyly. Here you are, Amma. I've been wondering where you are. Will you follow your father? Yes, and he wants you to come with us. Please, Adu, come with us. It would be good for us to go together. You know I don't know anybody there. Adu bowed. Why, Adu? How was Adu going to tell Amma that he had chosen to go with Apia back to the village? Susa was where he was born and bred. Going back seemed the natural thing to do. Moreover, his heart was in Susa, where he would live in the familiar places again, close to his family. Amma wanted to cry, but Adu tried to explain to her why it was necessary for him to go back to Susa. It is only for a while, Amma. Once we get settled, I will visit you often. Amma began to cry. Suddenly she stood alone. Once she had been a happy girl living with a mother, now she was thrown out like a fish on the dry land. She was being led away by a man who was her father, but whom she knew nothing about, to a town that she had never seen, into a family that she was a stranger to her, to face a baffling future. Yet all this would have been a little bearable if Adu had gone with her. But even Adu, the boy she was growing to love, was vanishing from her life. She had been sharing his lonely life, his pains and sorrows, his future, but now there seemed nothing to share anymore. Was there a time meant to end this way? Adu walked fast. He was going to teacher of Ofori's house. News about the teacher's transfer from Burma was on everybody's lips. The news came to Adu like a jab in his stomach. If teacher Ofori was going away from Burma, his own days in this town were numbered. Whether his auntie allowed him or not to go with Apia or not, he saw in the teacher his father and mother and certain aspects of Yaro. If Ofori was leaving Burma, then his own life must change. A way must be found to make his aunt realize him. He must not be left alone when Ofori and Amma were going away. He knocked on the door. Come in, Ofori called Adu. Walked in. Becky was there, busily addressing many envelopes. Hey Adu, you heard the news? Ofori said. Sir, they say you're going. Yes, Adu, your friend and teacher is going. Ofori didn't expect what followed. Without being told, Adu sat on the chair and began to cry. He did it so suddenly and sobbed so hard that tears stood in Becky's eyes. She left the envelopes and placed her hands on Adu's shoulders. The touch seemed to make things worse. Adu's body shook. Stop crying, Adu. Becky tried to console him. It's painful for all of us. Is there something we can do for you before we say goodbye? It was bad for Adu and also for Ofori and his fiancée. Ofori felt sorry for Adu. The boy was like a young brother to him. He was a boy. Now, as the boy cried, Ofori's own heart broke. Adu had had his full share of grief. He began to see his departure as a harder blow to Adu than to the other pupils. Adu didn't get on with his auntie. He was always on the losing side. Sometimes Ofori had feared for him. But how could he help this boy? Perhaps he had already been doing it here in Burma. But simply being around to listen to him and to direct his life was not enough. Now that he was being transferred, what would he do? We have been thinking about you, Adu, Ofori said. You know your friend Amma is going away with her father. Adu nodded and wiped his nose. We thought her father would take you with him. It would be lovely, Adu, Becky said. You would be close to your friend Amma. Ofori and Becky had discussed this, but they were not sure whether Deborah had thought of it. Amma and her father want me to go with them, Ad replied, but he paused. Then he looked at Ofori and added, I don't want to go with them. The surprise on Ofori's face spoke for him. Adu explained, I'm going to miss Amma too much, and I wish I could go with her. But teacher, I don't know her father very well, and I don't know his town. My father told me a story about him, how his wife, Amma's real mother, died, and what happened before he married again. Amma herself is not sure how life is going to be for her. I don't know. He paused. If it were possible, I would rather go back to the village, Adu said, with a tingle of helplessness at the end. Back to the village, Becky asked. Yes, there is a man who has come from Susa. He was one of my father's friends, and his wife and my mother were best friends. He came to see a friend here. It seemed to Ofori and Becky that Adu was about to tell them something. They listened keenly. Adu continued, when I told him about all that I've gone through, he asked me if I wanted to go back to Susa and live with him. Ofori looked at Becky and they both nodded. All at once, this appeared to be the solution to Adu's predicament. It was certain Adu would find no happiness with his auntie. Going away with Amma and her father would have been a fine option if Adu had had no options. But if he has but if his own choice was to go with his father's friend back to the village where he was born and raised, they would give him their support. But my auntie has refused to let me go with him. She said I would leave the house only if she was dead. Ofori knew of Goma's power over Adu. She could wedge herself between Adu and progress. Unless she was restrained, he felt strongly that Goma, having abused the simple trust to protect the dignity of her own brother's son, had also lost the privilege that went with this responsibility. The privilege of exercising authority over another human being. He saw Goma's threat to keep the boy against his will as un- un- undeserved. These thoughts reminded him of something he had been withholding from Adu. He must tell him now. Adu, he said, the chief has been thinking about you. As far as Adu was concerned, the sooner the case was over, the better. People congratulated him for his heroic deed in retrieving the chief's treasure. But the weight of having brought two people to prison was heavy on him. The chief is thinking of rewarding you, Adu, Ofori informed him. He asked me if there was anything you want him to do for you. Adu smiled. Can he help me to go away from my auntie and follow Apia back to Susa? Yes, said Ofori. I think so. I will ask the linguistic about this. When I left her, Amma When I left her, Amma was crying. She's been crying since she heard that my auntie is not her real mother. Naturally, Adu, Becky said, she has been placed in a difficult situation. I feel for the girl. I don't know what she will do. Would it be alright for the chief to let us both go to Sosa with Apia? This unexpected visa request threw Ofori and Becky off balance for a while. It was Becky who spoke. It is a delicate issue, I think. Besides, do you think Amma will like Susa in the way you did? She has lived with your auntie for 14 years here in Burma. She scarcely knows Susa the way you do. You were born and brought up there until 2 years ago. Well, I don't know. This is a sad matter. Offer let out his feelings. It's so unfair for one person to throw two young lives into these chores. After a pause, he continued, Becky is right, Ado, but I will mention it to the chief's linguistic.